Hello, my name is Cal Hansen. I'm with the Woodcraft store in Spokane, Washington. Today's demo I'm going to do on segmented bull and wood turning. I'm not going to go through the actual turning of the bowls. Everyone that's to this stage probably knows how to use their tools, so I'm going to go through how to calculate your segments and your design, and I'll go over some calculations and some of the tools that I use, and from there we'll take any questions that you have. To start out with, I like to do a full drawing of the design that I'd like. Whether it is a bowl like this, I'll take and get into a bigger piece of paper where you can actually get a full-sized picture of what you're going to do, and then you can calculate out how your segments are going to be. The big thing is you want to have enough wood that you're not going through, and that's experience talking, so that you don't have a piece of firewood. We'll go over some of them calculations, and the first thing is you want to know your dimensions of the bowl that you're doing, whether it's say 8 inches across. The calculation will be in there so that you don't end up with a 4-inch bowl, you have an 8-inch one. So simply, there's a lot of ways that people want to calculate their segments and that. The easiest way for me to do it, and there's a million different ways to do it, is you take the diameter of your bowl times the pi, which is 3.1416, and that gives you the length of wood that you'll need for that individual ring that you're putting together. And then you divide that by 180, and divide that by your number of pieces, which would say you've got 12 pieces or 12 segments that you want to do. Then you calculate your alongside outside distance. I'll come over to this chalkboard for a second. Whoop, run out of ink on that one. Here's your segment, your sides. This would be your long side, this is your short side, and this is your width of the segment from front to back, so that as you turn, let's say you're going to do a 3/8 diameter bowl, you want to have enough wood so that you can do that 3/8 diameter without going through your wood pieces, because all this is going to be gone. So you want to do it that way. The calculation that I use for, let's just take for easy numbers, let's make this we're going to have a 10-inch diameter bowl. So you take your diameter of the bowl, 10 times 3.1416, which is the pi diameter of the bowl, and it'll give you 31.46 inches. So that's the length of this board after you've cut it, but that's how many segments you're going to need. You'll take and divide that by your total length, divide it by your number of segments. So let's say that 31.486 is divided by 12 or 10 for segments. That gives you 3.1 inches that you need for this long side, so that your next one will come in. So you have when you're done, you're going to have a 10-inch diameter. Like right here is going to be your next segment to come in. This here will be your next segment. And you're going to have 10 of those around, but you're going to need a 31-inch piece over a 30. I usually cut a little longer than 31 inches. So you have a little bit of room if you have a knot or a wormhole or something in the wood that you're using. But once you get that figured out, you take and divide your 31 point whatever inches you got by the number of segments you're going to have. So if this is 10, you divide that 31 divided by 10, gives you 3.1 inches. So that'll be your long side dimension that you're going to cut. And to figure out your angle that you do, you divide 180, which is 180 degrees, and that's half of 360 would be half of your bowl. you just divide that by 10, and that gives you an 18 degree cut that you'll have to do for your miter on here, and that's on each side, 18 here, 18 here. So when you set up your miter, you have to do it that way. And I'll show you the T-sled that I use. I've tried to make my own out of wood, and in the weather we have where you're expanding contraction, you never have enough. It doesn't work out right. Question?
Yeah, do you have a simple equation you can write down there for the viewers?
You bet. For the equation for figuring out, I go with the diameter of the bowl, which let's just say it's 10 inches, diameter times 3.1416, and that will give you your total board length. Excuse my handwriting, it's a little rough. That'll give you your board length, and then you have to divide that board length. We'll just give BL for board length, divided by the number of pieces that you want in that ring, and you can go up to 90 pieces, you can go up to 180 pieces if you want. It'll be in 1 degree increments. But here's your board length, which is going to be your overall length of 31 for this 10-inch bowl. Then you divide that by your number of segments. So board length equals number of segments divided by your pieces. And that'll give you the long side length to cut. Long side equals number of segments divided by your pieces. And that gives you your long side is your measurement. If that made sense. Did that make sense to you, sir? All right. As far as when you've got all your segments cut, I mean, this is the part that most people get hung up on is the math of it. Like I said, people want to use tangent, and that's fine if you want to do it that way. But this is the absolute easiest way: is just diameter times pi gives you your board length. The board length divided by your number of pieces gives you your each segment long side length. So that's the easiest way to do it. So any questions on that, I'd be happy to clear that up. Now as far as the design, on it, like I try and do a full scale drawing, and I usually try and do the design on the same, and this is what they call brick lane, when you just offset them by half of the segment. So what you do is you take and you draw out how you want to do it, whatever pattern you want to do, and then I'll do an actual size drawing where the bottom is, let's say that's 4 inches across, 5 1/4 across, up to, this is a 10-inch on the top. So what you have to do is, say your pieces are, here's a segment, let's say this piece is 3/4 inch thick. There, you're going to want to make sure that you have enough where you draw a diagonal line down, you're going to have enough wood left that you don't go through the segment. And I have done that. So then that's why I do a full scale drawing. Like this one here, you'll see for the top, it's a 1/2 inch segment. That's all the thicker that it needs to be from front to back. Get down into here, and this has got to be a 3/4 inch segment because of the angle of the bowl that's coming down. If you get a real steep angle, your segments are going to be 2 1/2 inches thick from front to back. And that's so that you don't go through the wood. So as far as that's once you figure out what degree your bowl's going to be at, then you're going to calculate on that. And that's not going to change your calculation on your outside diameter. That's just going to be the width of it. So pretty straightforward on how that is. The biggest thing is the calculating that people do. And I've got a simple chart which anyone can look up online for the segmented wood turning. This gives it for like a 4-sided bowl up to a 36-inch bowl, and it gives you your length of cuts, and that's where being able to calculate with the diameter times 10, I mean, as your bowl comes down to 10, 9.5, 9, just as you get that curve of the bowl figured out, like on this one here, say that top is 10, this next one down here is going to be a 9.5 down to a 9, and I try and calculate each segment so that you don't go through the bowl down to you end up at a 4-inch bottom, and then you can curve down and you're not going to go through the wood. As far as the tools that I use for, get this out of the way, the tools that I use, like I said, I've tried to make my own degree jigs for 10 degrees out of wood, and with the movement that we have, I just could never get them so that I had a square or a actual 10-degree angle, and I'd have to glue up my segments in half rings, then you're sanding, then you glue them together. With this is a tool that I use. It's by Incra, and once you've set it up to your toolbar or to your table saw, it's right on. You put it on 1 degree, it cuts 1 degree. Put it on 15 degrees, 20 degrees, it cuts. And this is the one that I have for my personal use. I just we sell these at the store.
Do you have an item number?
Oh, and this item number for it, of course, is a 143842. And this will actually get you down. I try not to do segments that are like 15.34 degrees. I try and stay on a 6 degree, 9 degree, 15 degree angle, so then you're not having to split the hairs of it. But this will take you down 2/10 of a degree. Works wonderful. So made in the USA and proud of it. On the sled that I have, I've got a couple of different ones, but this one goes in 1 degree increments. That's how I like to do them. I put on a false fence so that I have something to cut into, and I made it out of hardwood. It's just made out of oak so that it's stable. It doesn't change much with the weather. And like I said, here everything's graduated in 1 degree increments. So if you're doing a 6 degree bowl, 15 degree bowl, you put it on there, you can glue up all at once. On my table saw, the throat plate for it, I cut a 45 degree, and I didn't bring it with me, I apologize. I cut a 45 degree piece that goes on here so that when you're cutting the wood, it slides away from the blade. And all I did was just double stick tape it onto my throat plate. Works wonderful because I've had the pieces, when you're cutting that many pieces, I think one of these has 1,000 and some pieces. You get into them little ones, they'll get caught in the blade and kick back at you. And so having that little 45 degree ramp works great. And I'll show you on the board here what I mean about the 45 degree. Here's your table saw. What I mean by this is the top where your blade's at. That throat plate, or that 45 degree, I double stick tape it right on the side, so when you're cutting that board, because it's 3/4 of an inch off with that T-slot, they just slide off, and here's your segments will come over here instead of getting hooked in the blade. And I've had it happen. It gets shot with a piece of wood. So anyway, as far as cutting the blanks, like I said, you get into something like this one, I believe this one has 1,094 pieces or something. I try and stick with solid bottoms. I haven't had too good a luck with, over years, the glue gives way or from the expansion and contraction. So I like the solid bottoms. Like I said, there's a million ways to do stuff, but as far as the segments, like here, I got just walnut and oak, just for an example. I've got a ring I made up. But this, of course, is your long side. This is your short side, and this would be your width. As far as how big your rings you want to do, you can do rings from 1/8 inch up to, as big as you want to turn. But the important one of this is your long side, because that's going to determine your diameter of the bowl. So, as far as like this one here, I did a 12 ring, or a 12 segment ring, excuse me. And what it is I just did it so they would contrast with each other. And as far as how I set up, I'll glue each ring, and then I use these band clamps. When I first started doing it, I would really torque down on these things and thinking that I was winning by... Question?
Best kind of glue.
The best, and the glue that I use, the best glue that I found, especially because I don't have any of these outside, they're inside, is just the Type Bond Original. It sets up quick, and usually by the time, I'll usually glue up, like in this bowl here, I'd glue up 6 rings at a time, just one right after another, and by the time I was to the 7th ring, I could unclamp that first one I did and have it ready for the next. And you can start, I've had good luck, after about 4 hours of this drying, you can start turning, start gluing the rings together. So Type Bond Original, that's great. 80L21 is the part number for that from Woodcraft. Great item. As far as now with your clamping up your segments, what I do is I get it close to where it's got to be. Then I'll just take one out at a time, put glue on, which we'll do it. Put a little glue on, and you don't have to get crazy with it because it's gonna get smashed out of there. So what I do is I'll just go on one side, just give it a little rub together, do up the next one. Same thing, you're just going to give a little rub. Yeah, and there's not really any, it's not going to set up before you get them all done. But that's how I just go around, just give them a little rub. Like I said, you get excessive with the glue, and then you're going to get the squeeze out, and then you're cleaning and I usually do it on a plastic mat at my house. So, but if you do it too much, then too much glue, then you just have a big mess. So I keep a wet paper towel handy. Like I said, when you're putting these together, I used to just really torque down on these as hard as I could, thinking that the more pressure was better. But then you actually, with that clamp, it actually bends or torques them so that you have to sand them flat. So I just like to just give it enough so that it'll take out the gap of it. And you'll see the glue just starting to, sometimes you just have to mess with them a little bit to get them to line up. Then as soon as you get a little bit of tightness on there, you'll see the glue starting to pop up. You know you got enough pressure. It's not, you don't have to kill it, because there you got a little bit of wiggle in there. But there you can see just from that cut with that Incra saw, there is no gaps in there. And if you bring in a segmented bowl to someone that is a segmented turner, the first thing they do is go, huh, you got gaps in there. So the biggest thing is don't get too much pressure on here. And I know people like to make their own jigs. That's great. I've tried a lot of them. this Incra miter sled, it's right on the money, and this is proof of it. You can look at my wood turning. I'm getting better at it, but
Do you ever use a compound miter saw to cut your segments instead of a table saw?
I haven't had good luck with as far as other tools you could use a compound miter saw. I haven't had good luck with that because you end up gluing up, say you got a 10 segments, you'll end up gluing it together, and you'll put you don't glue both halves together. You end up having to sand the halves till they meet up square. I just haven't had good luck with it, and there just is too much play in them, and that's where that Incra, it makes a whole difference. Like I said, I've tried all the sleds, all the ways to do it. That's the thing I found to work the best. And proof in the pudding, there's no gaps in this stuff. As far as a wait time for this, like I said, I've got 7 sets of these clamps. By the time you mess around and get it glued up, set it aside, by the time you get to that 7th one, you can undo the first one you did, start over again, and in a half hour, you've got them all glued up. About 3 hours of wait time, you can start gluing the pieces together, the segments, stacking them. And what I do is I use them on my lathe, and you guys are familiar with your lathes. I use the tailstock with the screw in to clamp them. I don't use a fancy wood clamp or anything. I use my lathe. Like I said, you got about 10 minutes, and that lathe or the glue's tacky enough to hold it, where you can put on another piece. I usually stack 5 pieces, get the inside turned. Otherwise, you're going down a long vessel, so trying to hollow out. But I would do about 5 at a time. Don't worry about the outside. Get your inside done so you don't end up blowing through when you're doing the outside and inside. So, any questions? I would certainly answer questions. Leave your comments. I would love to reply to it. So,
what's your favorite kind of wood?
My favorite kind of wood to work with is probably the black walnut. Some of the exotic woods like the Padukes and they got a lot of oil in them, so depending on what finishes you want to do, you have to wipe them down with the denatured alcohol, and it's a little more prep. But this is maple and walnut, both of these that I did, and they turn nice, they finish nice. I don't have any problems with those. But that's a good question, because a lot of people, if you do oaks, you got a lot of sanding involved with oak because it's a big grain, or a coarse grain compared to the fine grain woods. So I've done soft woods before, like this is a piece of cedar. This is cedar and pine. It turns out good. You have to do a little more sanding on it, but you can do soft woods, hard woods. People turn the Corian, and as far as that, you can fill in any voids with like the glaze coats or the AccuSeal. So, yep, as far as the thing is it takes a little time to get used to the math of as far as calculating. But once that's done, then you got, like with this one, you got about 6 hours of cutting pieces out. Then you got about 7 or 8 hours of gluing stuff up. And then it's the wait time, and then it's the turning, the fun part. So, but it's a nice way to get out of the shower, get out of the house, and get away from people and do your own thing. So, all right.
Is there anything that people starting to do this that you taught a class that you kind of give them a tip to, something that you experienced that that they're going to, any tips or tricks on that?
My best tip I can give, the frustration level was very high when I started this because I was trying to save a few bucks and make my own jigs for 15 degree, 6 degree, And I tried to make an adjustable one, and like I said, the wood, it moves too much. This Incra jig, no matter which one you get, there's 4 or 5 different versions of it. It's right on the money. You set it to your table saw blade, get everything square. Proof's in the pudding right there. It cuts, if that's a 15 degree, it's 15 degrees. So that's my biggest hint I can give as far as don't get in a hurry once you've glued up to stick it on the lathe and start spinning, because I've had a couple of them come apart. So if you have to wait overnight to do it, that's great, because you got a lot of time into cutting pieces, prepping wood, gluing, so it can fall apart in a hurry.
Is that the best clamp to use is for your rings?
The best clamp that I found to use for these is just these automotive clamps that I just get at the hardware store. And the thing is like I said, I started out just cranking them down like I had to, and it'll warp and then you end up hand sanding and, trying to get it square so that when you put them together, you don't have a gap this way either. Besides the gaps up and down from not cutting the right angle, then you get a gap from it not being square, even though they're putting pressure on it, and then it's trying to tear itself apart if it's not square. So that's another, just don't put too much pressure on, and they'll stay square for you.
Can you use rubber bands?
You can use rubber bands. I've tried it with the smaller ones, and it just doesn't seem like you get enough tension with them. And there's a couple of homemade strap that I've seen a guy use, and it's just simply, you just twist it till the rope gets tight. I haven't tried that. There's several different ways to do it. These clamps work awesome, so they're quick and easy, and as you're trying to clamp up 1,000 pieces, you don't want to be out there all night. So I just swap my clamps, and they work great. A couple bucks at the hardware store, and you're good to go. So, only good, or not the only good, but the one thing I can say is it takes the frustration out by having a good tool. That's, as far as a demonstration on these, it's fun to do. It takes a lot of time, but it's what I like to do, and if you have any questions, I'd sure like to answer them for you. I look forward to doing our classes at the Woodcraft Spokane. I do our turning classes from introduction to bowl turning to segmented turning. And question?
I have another question from online. What size lathe did you use for those big ones?
Got a question from the audience. How big of a lathe do I have? I've got a Milwaukee Delta lathe, and I'm able to turn on the outboard side of it, and it's got a bed extension, so I can turn up to 22 inches. And the thing nice about that, about doing the segmented turning, is it's not a hunk of wood. Like if you put on a 22-inch piece of wood onto the outboard side, you'd have to have it cemented down to the ground, where this is, all this is just a board cut into segments. It's not that heavy. But like I said, you want to glue up maximum of about 5 at a time. That way you can get the inside done. Otherwise you're reaching way too far over your lathe or your tool rest. So if you do them just in steps of 4 or 5, you can get the inside done, sand it out, then you're not trying to reach in there. So, yep.
Perfect.
So, as far as it's fun to do, and the biggest thing is sitting down and just draw out what you want to do, calculate your rings, have them wide enough so that you're not blowing through the wood. And I've done that several times. It's frustrating because you just spent hours cutting pieces. So, but that's a great way to do it. And what works good is you get the companies that have have the big calendars, the back sides are always blank, and those work great for, so. But as far as the demonstration, I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you next time.